In 1868, Japan had no currency, no banks, no gold. Money was whatever paper your local lord printed that year. Hundreds of rival notes circulated, gold and silver traded separately. 30 years later, Japan was borrowing millions of pounds in London, and it beat Russia with money raised on Wall Street. Nobody handed Japan that credit. It was engineered step by step. The engineering had a cost, and ordinary people paid it. Farmers were taxed into ruin to buy back the currency. Samurai were paid in paper bonds and became bank shareholders. This is not about emperors or generals. This is the ledger. The first plan was simple: copy what America was using. In 1872, Japan passed a National Bank Act from Washington. Private banks could print their own notes against government bonds. Every note had to be redeemable in hard coin immediately. That single requirement killed the business model before it started. In 4 years, 4 banks opened. One never opened at all. A capital market cannot be legislated. It has to pay. So in 1876, the government simply deleted the redemption clause. Notes no longer converted to coin. Bonds became the reserve. Everything that followed was built on that single small deletion. That same year, Japan abolished the samurai's hereditary stipends entirely. 2 centuries of guaranteed income canceled by one administrative decree. They were not paid in cash, but in interest-bearing bonds. The commutation was valued near 174 million yen, and the new law let those bonds count as capital. Up to 80% of bank capital could be paper. A dispossessed warrior class became a shareholder class almost overnight. By 1879, 153 national banks were operating nationwide. Samurai supplied 76% of that capital, merchants under 15%. An elegant pension reform, and it also produced serious inflation. To crush the Satsuma Rebellion, the state printed 27 million. Unbacked paper promised to be redeemed over 15 slow years. By 1881, inconvertible notes reached 153 million yen. The government held under 9 million in coin, 5%. Currency backed by 5% of itself is a rumor. Matsukata took the finance ministry and did the unpopular thing. He ran surpluses, burned paper money, and forced prices down. Prices fell 23% in 3 years. Farms went under. State factories and mines were sold cheaply to private houses. Mitsui, Mitsubishi, and Sumitomo bought Japan's industrial base at discount. Deflation alone fixes nothing. Nobody yet controlled the money supply. Matsukata went to Europe hunting a central bank to copy. He studied France first. He was advised to take Belgium. A newer statute, cleaner design, written after everyone else's mistakes. The Bank of Japan opened in 1882 on the Belgian charter. From 1885, it issued notes convertible into silver on demand. Old national banks lost the right to print their own. By 1899, their notes were gone. They became commercial banks. 27 years after the revolution, Japan had one currency, one issuer. Now it needed something harder to buy. It needed creditors. Silver was falling worldwide. A silver country could not borrow. Gold was the entry ticket to the London capital market. Japan had no gold. In 1895, it defeated Qing China. The Shimonoseki indemnity was 200 million taels of silver. Matsukata insisted on payment not in silver, but in sterling, and not in Tokyo, into accounts held in the city. That transfer became the reserve. In 1897, Japan adopted gold. It was never really gold. It was sterling sitting abroad. The empire's monetary base was an account in another country. 7 years later, that account decided whether Japan could fight. The 1904 war with Russia cost more than Japan owned. Roughly 2/3 of the resulting debt was owed abroad. Takahashi Korekiyo was sent abroad to sell bonds nobody wanted. London hesitated. Japan was an unknown, fighting a European power. In New York, Jacob Schiff of Kuhn Loeb took it. He underwrote $200 million of 410. A war in Manchuria was financed from desks in Manhattan. Without that first loan, the gold standard might have broken. Japan won and immediately owed its victory to foreign bondholders. The empire now depended permanently on access to foreign capital. Ordinary banks could not do everything, so the state specialized. The Yokohama Specie Bank handled foreign exchange and trade finance. By the 1920s, it cleared nearly half of Japanese trade. The Kangyo Bank lent against land, the Industrial Bank, industry. Then came the colonial banks, which did something far bolder. The Bank of Taiwan, from 1899, printed its own notes. The Bank of Chosen did the same across occupied Korea. The Central Bank of Manchu followed in 1932, tied to Tokyo. Each colony got a currency that could only settle against Tokyo. That was the yen bloc, empire built entirely from paper. Standard history calls pre-war Japan a banking economy. That's wrong. The 5 great banks were real: Mitsui, Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, Yasuda, Daiichi. By the 1920s, they held a quarter of all deposits. But large firms did not mainly borrow, they issued shares. Pre-war Tokyo had a deep equity market running since 1878. Shareholders, not bankers, sat at the center of corporate power. The bank-centered Japan the world remembers came later, from war. Small firms and farmers, though, did lean hard on credit. So the picture splits by size: equity above, credit below. And thin, fragile credit is where systems always break first. The wartime boom ended, and in 1920 the runs began. 68 bank runs, driven by lending to the owners' companies. In a single day, central bank emergency lending jumped 57%. Then 1,923. The Kanto earthquake destroyed most Tokyo banking offices. 343 of 448 offices were gone. The state let the central bank rediscount so-called earthquake bills. Over 400 million yen of them, much already worthless. These were not earthquake losses. They were the 1,920 loans. A disaster became accounting cover for an existing solvency problem. The deadline was extended twice. The problem moved to 1,927. On the 14th of March, 1,927, the finance minister spoke. Kataoka told Parliament that the Tokyo Watanabe Bank had failed. It had not failed. He was wrong, and it was public. Depositors queued next morning. The bank failed, making him right. The panic exposed the connection everyone had avoided looking at. Suzuki Shoten, an enormous trading house, collapsed that same April. Its main creditor was the Bank of Taiwan, a note issuer. The central bank refused rescue. The Privy Council blocked relief. 37 banks fell, and the entire Wakatsuki cabinet then resigned. Takahashi returned, declared a 3-week moratorium, and stopped the bleeding. The response was the Banking Act of 1927, passed immediately. Minimum capital doubled to 1 million yen, 2 in cities. 807 of 1,400 banks failed that test. They had a choice: merge or close. Most chose merging. Then the ministry pushed 1 bank per prefecture as policy. The Bank of Japan enforced it under wartime powers after 1940. 1,400 ordinary banks in 1926, around 61 by 1945. 95% of the system was erased in 20 years. The stated goal was stability. The result was total concentration. A handful of institutions held the savings of an empire. In January 1930, Japan returned to gold at pre-war parity. Inoue Junosuke believed discipline would force industry to become efficient. He picked the worst month. The depression was already arriving. Gold left, prices fell. Rural Japan slid into real famine. Takahashi took over and left the gold standard in December. The yen fell 30% in a month, then 30 more. Roughly 60% against the dollar within a year. Exports surged. He cut rates, then did what nobody had done before. From November 1932, the central bank bought government bonds directly. Whole issues, straight from the treasury, resold to markets afterwards. It worked. Japan escaped the depression faster than anyone else. Keynesian policy applied several years before Keynes published the theory, but he had built a pipe from treasury to printing press. He always meant to close it once recovery was secure. He kept military spending under 15% of the budget. The army understood exactly what he was doing to them. On the 26th of February, 1936 officers came for him. Takahashi was killed. The pipe he built stayed wide open. An emergency tool, designed as temporary, became the war's funding. Nobody who followed him ever had reason to shut it. After 1937, the market wasn't reformed. It was switched off. The Temporary Funds Adjustment Act ranked every industry by decree. 533 sectors sorted from A1 down to C. Munitions was A1, approved automatically. Category C received nothing at all. Credit was no longer priced by risk, but allocated by committee. In 1942, a new law placed the central bank under government. The governor state-appointed, the bank defined as a national instrument. Its design is generally said to follow the German Reichsbank. In 1944, each munitions firm was assigned one named bank. That bank had to fund it, whatever the balance sheet said. The empire ended in 1945, and the currency system with it. Colonial banknotes across the yen bloc became worthless almost immediately. Bonds bought by the central bank were repaid in collapsing money. Savers financed the entire war and were repaid through inflation. The occupation broke the Zaibatsu holdings into separate independent firms. But it did not break the banks. The banks held everything. Each firm still had one institution knowing all its finances. Historians still argue where that main bank relationship actually came from. Some trace it to the designated banks of 1944 and syndicates. Others to Zaibatsu ties or simply post-war shortage of capital. What isn't disputed is the shape of what finally emerged. A few vast banks holding a country's savings, directing industry. That structure was not designed in a post-war committee room. It was the residue of 70 years of emergency measures. A deleted clause, a samurai buyout, a Belgian charter copied, Chinese silver turned into London sterling, one minister's wrong sentence, a temporary pipe to the printing press that never closed. None of it was planned. All of it became the system.